Hello everybody, and welcome to the videos for the cumulative review packet number 10. What I would highly suggest to you at the beginning of this packet is to please have your factoring flowchart out, because I wrote this in a way to reiterate what questions you should be asking in what order. First starting with, do I have a greatest common factor? And then if I do, if I have 4 terms, then I have to group. If I have a trinomial, then I ask the questions like, all right, if I have a trinomial, do I have perfect squares on the ends? If I don't, do I have a trinomial with a lead coefficient of 1, so I could factor quickly into 2 parentheses right away? And then if nothing else works, if I have a trinomial with a lead number or lead coefficient bigger than 1, that's when I have to do split the middle term. And so you're going to be hearing me ask these questions on every problem. So let's get started with number 1. First question, do I have a greatest common factor? Yes. I can take a 9 out of 36 and 9. I could take x squared out of both terms, and I can take a y cubed out of both terms. Then when I'm dividing and seeing what's left over, sorry about that, 36 divided by 9 is 4. 2x's out of 2 is gone. 3y's out of 3y's is gone. So then I have minus. 9 divided by 9 is 1. 2x's out of 5 is 3. 3y's out of 8 is 5. So then I look at what I'm left with. Am I left with 4 terms? Can I group? No. Am I left with a trinomial highest power of 2? No. So I'm done here. All I can do is take out a GCF. Number 2. I notice that I have 1, 2, 3, 4 terms, and it looks like none of these terms are like. So as soon as I see 4 terms, I'm going to go ahead and factor by grouping. And if I look at the first 2 terms, my greatest common factor is an x, and I'm left with y minus 2z. If I look at my next 2 terms and carry down that plus sign, I can take a 5 out of both terms, and I'm left with 5 minus 2z again, which means that my final answer would be y minus 2z in one parenthesis, and what's remaining, x plus 5 in the other parenthesis. So this one I factored by grouping. The third example, I ask, do I have a greatest common factor? It doesn't look like it. I can't take an a out of all 3, and I can only take a 1 out. So then, if I don't have a greatest common factor, do I have 4 terms? No, I can't group. Do I have a trinomial, highest power of 2? Yes, and I notice that I have a lead number of 1, which means I can go directly to double parentheses. A times a is a squared. I want to see what multiplies to be 24 and adds to be the middle term of negative 10. So my options for 24 are 1 times 24, 2 times 12, 3 times 8, and 4 times 6. The pair that could get me a negative 10 adding would be either 4 and 6 or 2 and 12. So we have to think about this. If I want these to become negative 10, I need negative 4 and negative 6. If I want 2 and 12 to become negative 10, I need negative 12 plus 2. Which one of these pairs multiplies to be a positive 24? Well, it has to be the bottom one, because negative 2 times 12 is negative 24. So this is not my pair, so my factor would be a minus 4 and a minus 6. Example number 4. Do I have a greatest common factor at the beginning of this problem? Yes, I do. I can take a 3 out of all 3 terms. I cannot take an x out. So let me start with the 3. If I take the GCF of 3 out and divide, I'd be left with x squared plus 9x plus 20. And then when I look at what I have left over, just like number 3, I'm left with a trinomial, highest power of 2, and the lead number of 1. So whenever that happens, you would leave your GCF, and then you would split this trinomial into 2 parentheses, trying to reduce the power from 2 to 1. So x times x is x squared. We want 2 numbers that multiply to be 20 and add to be the middle term of 9, because we're looking at this trinomial now. The options for 20 is 1 times 20, 2 times 10, and then 4 times 5. The pair that can get me 9 would be positive 4 and positive 5. So this would be x plus 4, x plus 5. And so this would be my final answer. And yes, you do need the 3 in your final answer. If you want to make sure that this is correct, like any example here, you could do the distributive property backwards to check to see if you have your original problem. Number 5. First, do I have a greatest common factor? Can I take anything out of 6, 17, and 12? No. Does this have 4 terms? No, I can't group. Do I have a trinomial highest power of 2? Yes. However, I do have a lead coefficient other than 1. So this is when I have to do split the middle term because I don't have anything else. In fact, even if I look back at my previous examples, another good thing to ask is, do I have perfect squares also? Like 1 and 24 are not perfect squares, so I had to do what multiplies to be 24 and adds to be negative 10. Here I didn't have perfect squares either. And in this example, 6 and 12 are not perfect squares. So to start the split the middle term, the first thing we do is multiply the first and last term, or a times c. 6 times 12 is 72. So if I start to list my pairs, I have 1 times 72, 2 times 36, 3 times 24, 4 times 18, 5 doesn't go in, 6 times 12, and then 8 times 9. Which one of these pairs can help you add to be the middle term of negative 17? Well, if I scan, I notice 9 and 8. If I do a negative 8 and negative 9, these add to be negative 17, and they also multiply negative 8 times negative 9 to positive 72. So I'd split this middle term. And remember, it doesn't matter what order you do this. Because I see the 6 here, you could put either one next to it. I'll just go in order. Bring the 6y squared down, bring the negative 8y, then the negative 9y plus 12. Now I have 4 terms, so I'm going to group. What can I take out of 6 and 8? 2, y squared and y. I can take out a y, and I'm left with 3y minus 4. Bring down the negative. What can I take out of 9 and 12? 3. Can't take out any y's this time. So negative 9 divided by negative 3 is positive 3y. Positive 12 divided by negative 3 is negative 4. So now my parentheses match. So my answer would be 3y minus 4. And what's remaining? 2y minus 3. Final answer. Number 6. I noticed that I have a binomial, not a trinomial, but let's ask the questions in order. Do I have a greatest common factor? No. Are there 4 terms to group? No. Do I have perfect squares on the ends? Yes, I do. So when I have perfect squares, you can avoid the method on number 5 and think about square roots. What times what gives you 49x squared? 7x times 7x. What times what gives you 16? 4 times 4. How do I get a middle term of 0x? Well, here I have a 28x, and here I have a 28x. How do I get these 28s to combine to be 0? Well, one needs to be positive and one needs to be negative. So I'd have a plus and a minus. So my answer written more neatly will be 7x plus 4 and 7x minus 4. Number 7, first question, do I have a greatest common factor? Well, if I look at 50, 60, and 18, they're all even, so I at least can take out a 2. So if I do that, I'd be left with 25y squared minus 30y plus 9. Then I look at what I have left. Notice we don't have 4 terms, so I can't group, but I do have a trinomial, highest power of 2. So we can see where we can go from here. Do I have perfect squares left over on the ends? Yes, I do. Which means that I can skip split the middle term, and I can go straight to 2 parentheses. What times what gives you 25y squared? 5y times 5y. What times what gives you 9? 3 and 3. Then I need to get or combine to be a middle term of negative 30. So here I have a 15y and a 15y. How do I get 15 and 15 to be negative 30? 15y, 15y. Well, both would have to be negative to get negative 30. So I have two negatives in my parentheses, and some of you have noticed the pattern that there's a negative on the middle term. They're both negative, which is true. If I wanted to write this answer more neatly, because this parenthesis repeats twice, we'd have 2 times 5y minus 3 all squared. And yes, you need the GCF in your answer. Number 8, do I have a greatest common factor at the beginning? Yes, I do. I can take out a 2 and an x. And if I do that, I'm left with 4x squared minus 25. Then if I look what's inside here, I don't have a trinomial, but I could rewrite this as a trinomial. I do not have 4 terms, so I can't group. So what if I thought of this as a trinomial? 4x squared plus 0x minus 25. Do I have perfect squares on the ends? Yes, again I do. So I have my GCF on the outside. I can go straight to 2 parentheses. What times what gives you 4x squared? 2x times 2x. What times what gives you 25? 5 times 5. How do I combine to get a middle term of 0? If I have 10 and 10, one needs to be positive and one needs to be negative. All right, the last ones of just factoring have to do with the newest stuff of the x to the fourths. And what I want to reiterate to you is that this process is somewhat of the same process that we just did on the last couple of examples. That we look at number 9 and say, is there a greatest common factor I can take out? No. I don't have 4 terms. I do technically have a trinomial, 81x to the fourth plus 0x squared in the middle. And it doesn't really matter what you put on this as long as you know the middle term is 0, minus 16. Do I have perfect squares on the ends? Yes, I do. So I can factor this into double parentheses, ignore split the middle. What times what gives you 81x to the fourth? 9x squared this time, times another 9x squared. What times what gives you 16? 4 and 4. To get a middle term of 0, one needs to be positive and one needs to be negative. Now, as we talked about in class, one of these parentheses can continue to factor and one cannot. Whenever you see the plus sign, this cannot continue to factor. But whenever you see a minus sign, it can continue to factor. So we would leave 9x squared plus 4 alone. And this one would split into perfect squares again, because the 9 and the 4 again are perfect. 9x squared is 3x times 3x. 4, what number times itself gives you 4? 2 and 2. Again, I have no middle term, so we need one positive and one negative. So this would be my final answer for number 9. Now, to remind you about why this does not factor is if you tried to split this into what we did back here, notice that 2 times negative 2 is negative 4, not positive 4. This one you need to get a middle term of 0 that adds to be a positive, which is impossible because the middle term has to be one positive and one negative, and there's no way you can get a positive 4 there. Number 10, I look to see if I have a greatest common factor. I don't. Can't group it. I notice I do have perfect squares on the ends, so I'm going to go ahead and make my 2 parentheses. What times what gives you 16x to the fourth? 4x squared times another 4x squared. What times what gives you 9? 3 and 3. Just like the previous examples, I notice that I have a 12x squared and a 12x squared. To get a 24x squared, I need to put positives on both those 12s. Now notice, both of these have a plus sign. So just like this one, we cannot continue factoring, but we could notice that both of these are the same parenthesis twice. So we could write it as 4x squared plus 3 all squared. So on the next video, I'm going to pick up with number 11 and then go on to factoring with equations. Thank you for sticking with me. I'll see you on video 2.